What do we have today? Well, we've got a Zeiss Ikon Contaflex II camera. It differed from the Contaflex I in having the addition of a light meter here, selenium cell meter, which is lively, but of course probably not accurate. It's very hard to read anyway because the window where you would make your readings is just a fuzzy greyed out mess. I imagine that someone's had a go at cleaning that with some unsuitable solvent at some stage, and that hasn't done the plastic any good. These things happen. So, faults with the camera. Well, a quick look around the outside, and what can we see? Well, it's a bit scruffy looking, and this is corrosion around here. It's probably sat in a damp case at some stage, I would think, judging by that sort of corrosion. The base plate shows a dent at this point, so it's struck the surface at some stage. Probably not in its case by the looks of that. Certainly a lot of scuff marks on that chrome. Again, probably inside the case. I think that's just rubbing in the case has done that. Apart from that, well, let's open it up at the back. First thing I noticed here is that there's no take-up spool. I hope the owner has one of those somewhere for it. Otherwise, that looks quite complete at the back, looks quite tidy on the inside. Pressure plate looks nice and clean. Likewise, this is all clean and tidy on the inside too. Pop that back into place. Those keys are a bit rough in their action, they're probably just dry, maybe a bit of dust in there. What does the owner tell me? Looking in the front of the lens, there's a shutter blade floating around loose. Well, I'm not seeing that at the moment, but that's certainly a possibility. I have another Contaflex sitting here waiting to be serviced at some stage, and that most definitely has floating shutter blades. Oh yes, it will be. I mean, this will be the cause. Can you see that wiggle? That tells me that the screws holding the mechanism plate to the shutter case are loose, and that would have allowed one of the blades to lift off over one of the pivots and so float around loose. As I was saying, I've got another Contaflex sitting here waiting to go, and that has got exactly the same problem. Loose blades, and it's exactly the same as this. It's loose at that point. So that's that problem. Hopefully that'll be an easy one. Hopefully the screws are still present, and if not, I expect I can find some replacements. Anything else to note? The lens glass is hazy, but I don't think there's any visible fungus. There's certainly some marks in there. They would appear to me to be on the internal surface of the front group. Hopefully they'll clean. A few find it very dirty on the inside. Yeah, it's a bit dark looking. I'll see a few dark patches. There's shadows, which is probably silver failing on the prism. There is dirt and filth on the focusing screen, which will probably come clean. Anything else? That's about it really. Oh, and the note about the exposure meter. The needle moves, but it is sticky. Okay. I use an external meter with my old camera, so I'm not worried about repairing the meter as the CDS cell is probably decayed anyway. Well, it'll be a selenium cell and it will almost certainly be somewhat tired. Alright, So, into this camera I suppose. Well, I'll have to gather together my tools and get in. And I think I'll start strictly with the shutter before I do anything else. And there's a retaining ring in there, which you probably can't see, around the perimeter of that rear lens group. The rear lens group doesn't have any notches to engage your tool, so I can't remove the rear lens group first to make it easier to get at that retaining ring. And the retaining ring, it's quite narrow. I may well be able to get a retina tool in there and unscrew that, and that's what I'll attempt first of all. Well, using this tool here, a Beljan tool, which I normally use for doing the retinas, I was able to get onto that retaining ring. It was a bit awkward, but now it's turning. It's hard to get a tool like that to stay on there because there's no groove for this to seat into, and there's no lens protruding from the back for this to centre on either. So you're really just trying to engage it in two tiny little slots, which as soon as they are up level with the surface of the mountain here, of course the tool just slides off. So I'm pushing this round with the tip of a screwdriver. It's certainly coming loose. There it is, there's our shutter loose. So I can put the camera body to one side. There's our retaining ring, which as you can see is quite shallow. It's very thin. And here's the shutter. Well, the rear lens group looks quite dirty on the outside. So, to strip down the shutter. Right, well, I'll get my tools together. I think I'll start at the back, so I'll try using a friction tool on that rear group, see if it will come loose. Yep, that was the answer. Of course, there are no slots to engage a tool, so it was pretty much friction tool or nothing there. I'll pop that lens to one side with the retaining ring, and at the back of the shutter, what have we got here? There's a shim here, a spacer. Let's see if I can encourage that off. It's a very neat fit, so it catches in the threads of the retainer there. There's another one below it. I just want those off so that they don't get lost or damaged. Okay, now at the front of the shutter, I can see a hole in the rings. I can see 3 screws are visible there, and most likely they'll just hold this ring onto the front group. I'll find the right screwdriver. Back those screws out. That might be easier said than done. We've got one locating screw. No, I can see more. That one came loose. That one's not going to want to move. I'm accustomed to seeing 3 screws in a position like that. I'm only seeing 2. Which means these might locate just the focus scale ring itself, and that the screws holding this to the front group may be actually underneath there. I'm going to have to investigate that, but whatever happens is I've got to get this second screw out, which was exceptionally reluctant to go. This one here. I'll clean that slot out a bit of the accumulated dust and dirt. And I think a different screwdriver might be the answer there. So first a little drop of solvent on here, I think. And then some encouragement. Just give that a couple of little taps. That appears to do the job. Okay. I'll remove that screw in its entirety. And it's made. Yeah, they definitely just located the focus scale ring. Now, can I see the fixing screws through here anywhere? Can't say I'm seeing a lot. I'll see if I can feel the screw head with the tip of my tweezers. I can certainly see there's something there. I'm not convinced I'm getting onto anything. Let's see if that's 3 points on the ring. Yeah, there's another one. I'd expect there to be another one around here somewhere. Now, they may not be equidistant. There's one there. Alright, I'm going to have to hunt around for a very fine screwdriver to get in there and hopefully remove those 3 screws. This tool was great and allowed me to get that other screw out, but unfortunately the blade isn't long enough to get in there. I haven't got enough clearance, so I'm going to have to find a different screwdriver. Well, I've got out a better screwdriver and I've managed to locate and loosen 2 of the screws. But I haven't discovered the 3rd one yet, I think. That one, there's one there. That definitely feels loose. Tend to be pivoting on a point around here somewhere. There must be one screw here somewhere. There, perhaps. There is. That's it. I'm in. Okay, so what do we got? We've got the focus scale ring. That had 2 locating screws. Under the focus scale ring, which of course you cannot remove easily, we have screws here at 3 points. I'm just checking that they are all still present, that I haven't backed them right out. That looks good. Just making sure that they're below the surface here so that I can put that focus ring back on when I need to. That opens up the shutter somewhat. So the front element unscrews. Multi-start thread. The grease is very dry and nasty looking. And here, this will be the cause of the hazy lens. It's fungus, and this whole surface here is pretty well coated with fungus. Hopefully that will clean up. This is the middle group, of course, and I just need to put a spanner on here and loosen that off, and that'll give me access to the shutter itself. Tools. I'm going to have a quick look to see what I've got. In an ideal world, I'd like to use something flat across here, a flat blade that will drop into those grooves, and it'll give me best torque with minimal amount of likelihood of slipping off or causing any problems to those slots. If I distort this in any way, I know that I'm very likely to have a lot of trouble getting the front group to screw back in correctly, particularly it being a multi-start thread. It can be very awkward indeed to get the thread started, even if there's just a very slight burr on one of the lead-ins. So let me find the tool for this. I have a variety of tools that I've made at various stages to help me get retaining rings off. Looking at these, I'm not sure any of these are particularly helpful. This one, perhaps, if I machined a piece out of it, this would be another style that I've made to do a similar job in the past, and that would be ideal if that had just spanned that distance, but it doesn't. And the other end, those slots are far too wide, though with a bit of machining they could be made to work. I think I may, I'm looking at this to see whether this is the best thing for the job. Tools of this nature, this is a fairly hard piece of steel, quite, things like this can work well. You just need to machine the slots so you can grind them with a Dremel. You could use a mill, you you could use a file, you could use just about anything. Basically you just want to create two tangs the right distance apart that will engage the retaining ring, and either hold this in a crescent or something like that, or what I find is often the easiest answer is you set the tool in the top of the vise, so you've got a very limited amount of it sticking out the top. Then you can lower your shutter onto it to engage those lugs and then turn the whole shutter in order to remove that ring. And that's a technique that works very reliably, is much easier to than trying to fight with grabbing a tool like this with some other object to use as a handle. But before I go to those lengths, because it's going to require 20 minutes playing in the shed with the mill, I will try something simpler. Well, I just tried using a modified pair of pliers to get that ring loose. It wasn't having it, and I wasn't going to struggle and potentially slip and ruin that lens by doing it. So I will take this little piece of steel away and I will machine away the two slots on either side there to engage with that ring. And of course I've only got to break the thing loose. Once it's loose it'll spin off easily. Well, that's the idea. Let me go away and deal with this. Well, I have my tool sorted out. I'll see if it'll come loose with my fingers, and it won't. So it's down to the vise, as I said before, to put the tool in the vise and engage it and rotate the shutter to remove that lens. That came loose immediately once I'd got that tool in the vise and was able to grab hold of the shutter with the aid of a glove so I could get a good grip on it. And I can unscrew that centre group, and those tools can all go to one side. There's my centre group there. Now the inner surface looks comparatively clean. The surface that was between the front group and this centre group, this is the surface that is covered in filth and probably fungus. But however that might be, now we're down to the shutter, and hopefully all the fighting will be over. This is quite stiff. This is the aperture. That shuts down automatically. There's a spring in the camera that shuts this down to the preset aperture. This piece should shut the shutter blades down to the preset down to the closed position prior to firing. Just deciding on the best direction to tackle this from. Normally I remove stuff from the front anyway first. Looking at the flash contact there. Yeah, no, that looks alright. Looks a little bit unusual. So from the front, where are we? This should be fairly conventional, not expecting too many surprises. You can probably hear that rain pouring down outside. It's another beautiful spring day in Dunedin. Be very careful not to lose this tiny black screw, because they're very easily lost, and anything that's very easily lost requires replacement, and of course there are no replacements left. Because everybody's spares were used up a long time ago. this retaining ring screws on. I'm just using a toothpick to push this around and unscrew it so as not to scar it. If you use a screwdriver or the tip of the tweezers or something, it's exceptionally easy to slip and make a mess. Here's the front ring, dress ring. It's very grimy, a lot of dust and dirt on there. This is the ring that couples to the shutter speed cam plate. Again, it's very grimy. Now we're down to the shutter itself. The shutter speed cam plate. Now here I'm starting to see something interesting. This is corrosion. There's rust on the top of that post. This is the latch that prevents you from releasing the shutter unless it's properly cocked. This sort of internal cocking ring here that's pretty grimy looking. I don't know whether that's corrosion, but all this is very filthy. That little pinion. Here's the... Now that shutter is in the cocked position there. What's that waiting for? It's waiting for the self-timer to run down. Everything here is very, very sticky. I'm going to remove the main spring and cam. That is just very sticky. None of that stuff wants to move. That's all gummy with dried out grease. There shouldn't be a hell of a lot of grease in a shutter, but someone has done a good job of buttering this with graphite grease, and the base has just dried out over time, gone sticky. I'm sure the graphite's still graphite, that's not going to change its properties much, but the medium it floats in, the greasy part, that's just gone sticky. And this shutter here, it's a lot like the shutters in a Kodak Retina Reflex, the Type 025, the original Retina Reflex. Let's remove that shutter release lever. Yeah, that's... none of this stuff wants to move. That's very sticky. It's unusually so. It may be that there's more of a problem with this than I was expecting. Once I've cleaned it and reassembled it, I'll know a lot more. But one thing that can happen with a camera, any camera, rigid bodied camera, is they can get dropped on their nose from time to time. If they get dropped on their nose, what happens is that the load goes on the front of the shutter, pancakes stuff, so that the clearances aren't what the clearances should be, and it stops things from moving smoothly. Now, given the gumminess here, the reluctance to move, I think that it's certainly a possibility and something that I'll have to take into account. You can only sort of determine that that's the case by cleaning everything, putting everything back, and then discovering that stuff still doesn't move, and it should.